12-year-old Raj lived in a world of absolute scarcity. As he stood near the Sea of Galilee, his entire net worth was wrapped in a single piece of cloth, 2 dry barley loaves and 2 small fish. Surrounding him was a crowd of 5,000 people. They were far from home, the sun was setting, and the local markets were closed. Hunger was no longer a discomfort, it was becoming a crisis. Raj knew that if he kept the food, he would eat. If he gave it away, he had no backup plan and no guarantee of another meal. He was weighing his own survival against a need he couldn't possibly fill. This is the starting point for every major shift in the narrative. It begins when a person is forced to choose between the safety of what they hold and the risk of letting it go. Raj stepped forward and handed his bundle to the teacher. There was no laughter from the men around him, and the teacher didn't dismiss the gift as too small. He took the bread as if it were a treasure. The teacher broke the bread and began to pass it out. The supply didn't run out. Thousands of people ate until they were full, and when they finished, there were 12 baskets of leftovers rotting in the sun. As the crowd left, Raj sat alone on the hillside. He watched the light fade over the lake, trying to understand how his 2 small fish had just fed a literal army of people. He realized that holding on to his meal would have kept one boy full for an evening. Giving it away had changed the day for 5,000 families. Years passed, and Raj became a permanent fixture in the teacher's circle. He saw broken lives restored, but he also saw the growing shadow of the authorities. The religious and political leaders were no longer just watching, they were planning. Following the teacher was no longer a matter of watching miracles from a safe distance. To stay meant accepting the reality of being hunted. Every step closer to the teacher was a step further into the crosshairs of the state. When a movement threatens the status quo, the system reacts with everything it has. Raj was learning that proximity to change carries a heavy price. That price was paid in Jerusalem. Raj watched from the edges of the crowd as the teacher was executed. In a single afternoon, the man he believed would change the world was dead and buried. The movement was over. Raj was left in a city that hated him, staring at the total collapse of his future. The silence of that night was all he had left. But then the early reports started coming in. The tomb was empty. Raj saw him again, alive and breathing. The one thing that had seemed final, death, had been overruled. Seeing the teacher return changed the nature of Raj's fear. If the empire's ultimate weapon, the cross, couldn't stop the movement, then there was nothing left to be afraid of. Decades later, a massive famine hit the region. The social fabric began to tear as people retreated into their homes, hiding whatever grain they had left while their neighbors starved in the streets. Raj convinced people to stop hoarding and pool their hidden scraps into a single pile to share. This wasn't multiplication from the sky, it was a network. When the food was shared, scarcity disappeared. Everyone had enough because no one tried to have it all. The community survived. They discovered that when they chose to trust each other over their own survival instincts, the famine lost its power to destroy them. Raj eventually traveled to a city where the government ruled strictly through intimidation. It was a place where showing mercy to the wrong people was considered a crime against the state. He was arrested while feeding children on a street corner. To the guards, he was a disruptor. To the law, he was a threat to the established order. He was taken to an interrogation room. The ruler of the city stood over him, using every tactic of intimidation that had worked on 1,000 prisoners before. Raj simply sat in silence. When he finally spoke, he didn't beg for his life. He told the ruler that a city built on the fear of its citizens is already falling, and that only a society built on shared sacrifice can actually endure. The ruler searched for a way to break him, but Raj didn't flinch at the mention of the dungeon or the sword. The man in armor realized he had no leverage left. He couldn't command a man who had already decided his life wasn't his to keep. Powerful men often try to steer the world through force and iron, but the most lasting changes usually come from those who, like a boy with 2 fish, are willing to give everything away.